Dear friends, welcome. In lieu of the usual opening, we're going to have the sound of the bell. So we invite you to feel your breathing, to feel your body, and allow yourself to rest in your breath, in your body, as you hear the sound of the bell.
Ayubowan fellow Sri Lankans, thank you Kyra for that grounding and beautiful sound of the bell. We have an exciting show for every one of you today. This is our 42nd show and we are ending the season today until we reconvene in January of 2022. We have a fabulous show, exciting and full of wisdom, and I will quote from the book before I even proceed. The book that our speaker, our guest has written, and you will hear more about it later. There is a quote that says, "My friends, do not lose heart. We were made for these times. Ours is a time of almost daily astonishment and often righteous rage over the latest degradations of what matters most. You are right in your assessments. Yet, I urge you, I ask you to please not spend your spirit dry by bewailing these difficult times. Especially do not lose hope, most particularly because the fact is that we were made for these times. Yes, for years we have been learning, practicing, been in training for and just waiting to meet you on this exact plane of engagement." That's a direct quote. So, and we know we are all in troubled times, in good times, and we'll talk about this. So our show, as you know, listeners, we had 41 previous shows that we shared with you. We brought many skills and information. Our speakers were world-class leaders from around the world. We talked about peace. We talked about conflict. We talked about food, health, exercise, alternative therapies, yoga, energy healing, Ayurveda, acupuncture, empowerment, Qigong, politics, to name a few. And today, not with us for great reasons, is our regular host, Carol Tozer, who is in Spain playing basketball, or I think playing a game representing Sri Lanka. And then Kamini was also with us. She's not here with us, but is supporting us tremendously from behind the scenes. And then our Bhikkhuni, Tenzin Lokdran, who is in Australia and who tried valiantly to be on all our shows, but it was 1:30 a.m. When we had the shows for you here. So I want to remember every one of us, and then also welcome Selvi, who is here with us, and then Farzana, and of course Kyra, our guest speaker, and who was also our part of our show from the very beginning and until she moved to the United States. And it was not been easy for us because we had multiple commitments. Some days we pushed ourselves because we lived in different continents. In fact, today I had to wake up at 4:30 a.m. to be on this show. And as I said, we lost some of our team members. But one thing kept us going, and that was you. The promise we made to you that we will do this show on Wednesdays, share with you some wisdom. So we are so glad that you have been with us, and then we are here doing what we promised, because there was one thing in our mind: no matter where we lived, how can we bring the show to you at 7 p.m. on Wednesdays? And I think we delivered. So as I said to you, today is going to be a fascinating show. We have with us Kyra Joel Lingo, who wrote this fabulous book, We Are Made for These Times. And I am going to be quoting heavily from that book. Some of these words are not mine, it's hers. She says in her book, we need to be aware of the suffering, but retain our clarity and calmness and strength so we can help transform the situation. A true practitioner, she says, isn't someone who doesn't suffer, but someone who knows how to handle their suffering. And this has really brought home the message for me personally. Suffering is inevitable. And Kyra today will tell us how to transcend that suffering. So at this moment, I'm going to ask Selvi and then Farzana, what were your thoughts on the book and how challenging was it to be for you, both of you, to be on 42 shows from at diverse times for 2 years now? Selvi? Can't hear you, Selvi. Selvi, you need to unmute.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you so much, Soraya, for a very, very beautiful introduction and for us to start this show. And welcome, Kyra. It's lovely to see you again here. You've been part of our show since the very beginning, up until you moved back to US. When I saw the book, I thought it is so beautifully and simply written. And it is giving so much of wealth of wisdom that we can use for the current times. Particularly, you take the example of Floyd's murder and how we deal with it, how we look at it, And these are very, very important musings, because we are seeing so many of those happening, not just in the US, but all over the world. And these kind of human rights violations are subsuming us, and it is making us feel helpless. You see, and I don't think we need to feel helpless about it. And this book is helping us to see above it. So in that sense, I think it is really made for these times, this book, for us to help us look at conflict and human rights violations, which are actually exponentially high in this sort of the last 10 or 12 decades. 10 or 12 months, years. So I think this is very timely, and it's very, very beautifully and simply done, so that you can just read it and you can get the gist of it without much difficulty. But what's most important is that you have also given us in the book, for each of the issues taken, a proper way of, taking it forward with a meditation, with a chant, with a thought, and then journaling it. So it is actually it is not just theory, it's also practical. So I think this is a very useful addition to our work that we do on human rights. But finishing our 42nd show is something that I never thought we could. I never really thought we could go this long and, finish and complete and actually deliver so many. And that is something that I need to give credit to all our panelists, including Soraya and Carol and Farzana, Kamini and Tenzin, all of these people who have been part of us. Like Soraya was saying, we lost a few, but we didn't stop. I think that is what shows, resilience and tenacity, and that's where women score. And we have showed that we are women leaders who will not give up. And that's what I'm happy about this.
Thank you so much, Selvi. Farzana, your thoughts, please. on the book, and then how we stayed together and we've been delivering 42 shows.
Yes. I mean, it's really fantastic, Kyra, my dear, to be with you. It's like full circle for me, where we met because of the show, and then we met personally as well, despite COVID, and spent long hours talking about many interesting topics. And I feel it's like a culmination of your journey, or one part of your journey, where you now put it all in this book so beautifully. And it's I mean, as Selvi and everyone else said, the timing is perfect. It couldn't be at any better time, because we've seen and experienced so much of hardship, so much of loss, so much of sorrow and pain that people have gone through. And you're constantly trying to reason out and find out why, and also how to cope with it. And when you read your book, sometimes it's things that we were told before, or heard before, or known before, but you put it so beautifully in the book, especially in how to deal with situations, how to deal with a problem, and how to cope with it. And I also found some of your examples, which I could relate to personally as well, where the strong foundation, the root of the tree, right? The foundation that you, the parallel you draw to. I mean, sometimes many of us can weather great storms because of wonderful childhoods that we've had. And I want to link this back to one of our speakers, Durga, Selvi's daughter, who spoke, I think, a few weeks ago. And she said about trauma, right? And even medical situations or health can be linked to childhood trauma, and not really a physical or medical ailment. So you need to go back to even the time you were in the womb that this could have happened. And, you know, so if you had a perfect sort of childhood, even in the womb and even in your childhood, none of these ailments or health issues, or most of them, can be, a certain part of it can be eliminated. So your book, I also see it as a future guide to future mothers and future leaders and future parents who can use it to bring up their young children with a better set of philosophy and yeah. And well, about Wisdom Wednesdays, I think Soraya, I've missed only one program out of the 42. I've been here right throughout, supporting the team from whichever part of the world or country I am in, mostly around the country. And yes, our goal is to empower women, to make them at least think differently and be stronger in how they bring up their children, their families, their sons and their daughters. And also we want to empower them financially so that they have financial independence. And this is what we want to do in our next phase, where we raise some funds and go out there into the field and work in little pockets and show that difference of what we have done in a small community so that we can upscale it. Yes, looking forward to what you have to say, Kyra. Thank you.
Thank you, Fazana. I think something so beautiful about us was that we transcended all the divisions and the boundaries that we were taught we had. We looked at the work at hand and we respected one another. That was profound to me also. And again, going back to Kyra's book, I want to quote again, this is a phenomenal book, friends. I have read many books. I continue to read at least 2 books a month. This book has changed me because look at the positions today in Sri Lanka. You can't even go to your kitchen and put your gas on. The gas cylinder might burst. This is the kind of challenges we have, you know. You walk out, there's COVID and you don't know who is dying or who's going to die. And then you don't know whose rights have been violated. There's so much that's happening, but there's also so much beauty in life. And that's what Kyra talks about. She says, if we can change something, we should do it without complaining, judging, or blaming. But if we can't do anything to change it, we can learn to accept it. And not by avoiding any suffering, but by learning to take good care of it. Kyra teaches us, how are we going to take care of our suffering? So this is a story that I really loved in your book, Kyra. It is so simple. I just want to share this with you. You talk about Ajahn Chah, the Thai forest monk and teacher. One day he was taking a walk with his students, and when they passed a big boulder, he looked at his students and he said, do you think that boulder is heavy? And his students at once said, yes, it is extremely heavy. Then Ajahn Chah said, that is only if you try to pick it up. So friends, there are so many boulders you are dealing with, and we will ask Khaira how not to pick up those boulders. Before I give the floor to Khaira, I will introduce her. I can't do justice in this small introduction, but I will. So Khaira Joel Lingo began practicing mindfulness in 1997 and teaches Buddhist meditation, secular mindfulness, and compassion internationally. After living as an ordained nun for 15 years in Thich Nhat Hanh's monastic community, Khaira Joel teaches in the Zen lineage and the Vipassana tradition at the intersection of racial, climate, and social justice with a focus on activists, Black, Indigenous people of color, artists, educators, families, and youth. Now based in New York, she offers spiritual mentoring to individuals and groups. She is the author of the book that we have been quoting heavily and that has made a shift in our life. We were made for these times, skillfully moving through change, loss, and disruption. Khaira?
Thank you so much. I'm really moved as I sit here listening to the three of you. I just want to really express my deep gratitude to Wisdom Wednesdays. Meeting you at the time that I did was very auspicious for me. It was not an easy time in my life, and a lot was changing, and I was really held by all of you, each and every one of you. Selvi, Farzana, Soraya, Carol, Kamini. I haven't gotten to meet the Bhikkhuni Tenzin that you mentioned, but I'm sure she is also one of a kind in the same way. And I just want to say that I feel really closely connected to each of you. You know, that doesn't happen all the time. Also, I have to name Amina, right? Who also was,
certainly, yes.
Yeah, who was supporting us from behind the scenes. You know, you can work together with people, but it doesn't mean you will feel your heart open to them like friends. And I felt like that with each of you. And I've had really beautiful occasions to connect with you, Selvi, in your home, Farzana in your home, and with your children. And Carol took us to her house on the river. And, you know, I knew Kamini already and consider her such a dear friend, but there have just been some real links that have happened between us because of this show. And I really want to say I'm so grateful, because it was kind of a life support for me, a life jacket for me in a time of really rough waters. So let me just begin by saying a deep thank you and offer a deep bow of sincere gratitude and love to each of you. And you are mentioned in this book in the acknowledgements as the Wisdom Wednesdays crew. You're each there as a part of what made this book possible. So it feels also very right to be invited. You know, it's an honor, and it feels so like coming home to be invited to come back and talk about this book. I also want to offer my biggest congratulations and thanks to you all for keeping this show going now for 42 sessions. And what a gift to everyone, and particularly to women in Sri Lanka and everywhere. So may it continue for a long time to come. Thank you for this invitation to talk about my book and just to be in conversation with you. Every time I'm in conversation with someone, I learn something more about what I've said, or how it can be applied, or how it's being digested by people. So it's really a gift for me too, to get to hear how you're taking in this book. And just a little bit about how it came to be. Just before the pandemic, so in February 2020, I created a 10-day course on this free app called Insight Timer, which has thousands of teachers, many meditations for free. But they also offer courses. You have to pay for the courses. But I created this 10-day course, and it was called Skillfully Moving Through Challenging Times at the time. And it was basically what I felt I knew I could talk about, which was how to move through times of change, loss, transition, because I had gone through a huge life transition. A few years ago, I had been a nun for 15 years and felt really called to leave the monastery. And basically my whole identity fell apart in that transition, where all that I had come to see myself as had to dissolve and something new had to come into being. And I didn't know what that was going to be. I had to discover it step by step. And there were times when it was very scary, very, difficult, because I hadn't ever been in that place, or I didn't know what was coming. I mean, I had gone to school. I knew I would go to high school. I knew I would go to college. I knew I would, work. And then I decided to be a nun. And I thought I would be a nun my whole life. So I always was used to seeing some sense of what my future would be. And this was the first time I was like, it's not clear how am I going to make it? How am I going to? So I had to recreate my life. And so that's what the book draws on, what particularly kind of the lessons and things that really helped me when I was in a place of fear or doubting myself or not sure, or experiencing loss, seeing things pass away, seeing the impermanence of things. And so I made this course, this 10-day course, and then it came out literally the day before the pandemic was declared. And so there were hundreds of people taking this course, stuck in their apartments under lockdown, losing loved ones, getting ill themselves, facing incredible uncertainty. And it was an amazing, synchronicity and timing where people were sharing on the course on Insight Timer how much these teachings were helping them, how timely they were. And I was surprised because I had no idea, those things would align. And then my life took a real turn. I ended up returning to the US, and a beloved one, my partner, was listening to the course with me and said, you should make this into a book. And you've already got the texts, the scripts for each of your 10 days. And so I said, oh, good idea. And I sent it to a publisher. They accepted it. And so that's how it turned into a book. And the 10 days of the course became the 10 chapters. And it evolved from the course. I refined things. But it was actually, people have said, oh, how was it to write the book? It was hard, must have been so hard. I was like, actually, it was much easier than it normally would be, because 90% of the work was done already when I got it to the publisher. They were like, oh, we just make each of these scripts a chapter, and you add an epigraph, and and then they had questions, and I added things, subtracted things. But basically, I felt almost embarrassed at like, oh, I didn't really set out to write a book, but here it just sort of jumped out on its own. And I've been, so far really, really pleased and quite honored by the response. People seem to be appreciating it. People who read a lot of spiritual books, who I deeply respect, have said that they've read it and then they buy it for 5 friends because they feel it's so helpful. And so that kind of response, where I don't know, I wasn't expecting you know, anything in particular, but I that surprised me that people were finding it so applicable. And so I just finished offering a course, an online course based on my book. That was a 4-week. So I created video modules that were recorded and people could watch each week. And then we had a live session each Sunday. So I'm continuing to teach. There's a lot I can't cover even in a month-long course. I couldn't cover the whole book. So I'm leading a retreat starting this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, on the book. I plan to do more online courses in the coming year that are based on the book. So that's kind of, I don't know exactly how it's going to pan out or how I'm going to teach from it, but it'll be informing a lot of what I do going forward. And, you know, in terms of what I want to do in the future, what's really alive for me is my partner, who's an Episcopal priest. We want to start a Buddhist Christian center, a retreat center. Oh, if you can hear me, my video got okay. Okay, yeah, my video got stopped. So we want to start a Christian Buddhist retreat center where people can practice in an interfaith, interspiritual way. And we'd also really like for it to be within the context of an eco-village, so a place where many people come together to live, grow food, and live lightly on the earth in terms of food and energy and transportation and sharing things. And so that's sort of what I'm really wanting to manifest in the future. And I'm placing the book in that context of wanting to draw people into. So we're going to start a monthly group that's practicing in Buddhist and Christian traditions. My partner and I, starting in January, and I may also have a monthly group that meets to practice with the book. But we want to start developing community and working, you know, closely with people who might share this vision, so that when it's time, the time is right, and we are ready to actually start building a community, there will already be people that we are connected with that share the vision that we share. So
thank you, Kyra, for your beautiful vision. We wish you every success, and I would love to be a part of that journey. You know, I think it was Swami Vivekananda who said, we cannot have world peace unless there's peace between religions, and that is our hope. So I have 2 questions before Sylvie and Fazana want to ask theirs, and then we might have some questions from the audience. The first part of the question is, you lived in Sri Lanka for many years. What is the best you took from Sri Lanka, and what would you tell us Sri Lankans? What do we need to not do, but what energy do we need to change in your wise? And then the real question also is, you say in your book, don't try to figure out the answer by thinking about it. You say, in thinking over a question again and again, we do not generally arrive at real wisdom, but we easily tire ourselves and get even more confused and anxious. So how can I not figure out without thinking? So that's the question we have for you. Thank you.
thank you, Soraya. So as far as you know, I love Sri Lanka. I really did not want to leave when I left. It wasn't sort of, I had thought I would stay in Sri Lanka a lot longer. And I think, you know, one of the things that I feel coming back here to the United States, where we're in the midst of a very cold winter, I felt that my body was able to come into such a place of safety in Sri Lanka, because days are always the same amount of light. Like, because of its location on the planet, there's this gentleness to the air, the moisture in the air, the richness of the flora, the fauna, the abundance of life in Sri Lanka, all the green, all the water, the incredible diversity of sort of microclimates, with the mountains in the middle of Kandy, and the desert areas in the north. I got a chance to go to the north and to almost all the different parts of Sri Lanka when I lived there, and incredible diversity of peoples for such a small, compared to the United States, it's a small island, and to have so many languages and religions and histories all intermingled. It's quite an amazing place. And I think, it was such a gift of, of being received in that culture with so much love. It felt like a motherly love, the way I was received in all the homes and by the food. I don't think I could ever love a kind of food like I love Sri Lankan food. Like, even when I went to Selvi's home and she made a food I'd never had before, and I'd been living there almost 2 years, still there was foods from Sri Lanka that I hadn't tasted that were just, and Farzana sent me off to the US with a delicious Muslim paste that I was eating for months and months after that. And I still make my cashew curry with the peas, and I have my Sri Lankan homemade curry from my dear mother that kind of adopted me there. And I think that sense of welcome is one of the most beautiful energies in Sri Lanka. And also, it's such a place of such history. I mean, you wouldn't have Buddhism in the rest of the world without Sri Lanka, without the containing, the holding, protecting capacity that the Sri Lankan culture has offered to the whole Buddhist tradition. And so I felt very held there. I felt my body really deeply relax, and things that I had in the US, like I had trouble sleeping often, I had trouble with digestion, all of that went away in Sri Lanka. So I would my only wish or request to folks to whom I consider my brothers, sisters, siblings of Sri Lanka is to protect the beauty, the culture, the wisdom that is in your heritage, to not, to pass on to the next generation the beauty of the inclusiveness of your culture, and to not pass on the things that are not wholesome, right? That are maybe coming from other influences, the consumerism, the becoming more westernized, because you have something that is so precious and unique in all the world, and keep it for future generations, and for those from other cultures who really benefit from the healing and nourishing qualities of your tradition, of your multiplicity of traditions that all exist in one place so beautifully. And to your question, the second question, Soraya, about how to not think when we need to resolve something, or how, maybe how to think skillfully. Basically, it comes down to whatever we're doing in this moment is what is going to condition the next moment. So if we're worrying about the future, for instance, trying to think our way into a solution about the future, who we're going to be in the next moment is going to be a bit, is going to carry that energy of worry and fear and anxiety. But if we can think about what's going to happen in the future, but stay in the present moment, stay in our body, stay with our breathing, stay with a sense of being okay. Because if we really think about it, in the present moment, in general, we are okay. Most of the things that we are worried about, they're not right here. They're in our mind. But if we actually touch into what's right here and now, our heart is beating, our lungs are breathing in and out, we are okay. And if we can get in touch with that, then that's what carries over into the next moment and the next moment and the next. And if we have that kind of quality of presence, then whatever we need to deal with, we will deal with it much better because we're dwelling with what is rather than in our mind created world, which doesn't match reality. So the way we can really resolve our issues is by staying in our body, in our present experience, knowing what's what. And that's where we're solid, that sense of rootedness Farzana talked about, of a tree that's rooted, that can withstand the storm. Then whatever comes our way, we have something with which to meet it so that we don't get knocked over by it. And that doesn't come from thinking. I mean, we can use thinking to support us, but if we're being driven by thinking, then we get in trouble. But we can think and know we're thinking. We can use it skillfully and let it go when we need to let it go, when it starts to get us spinning around. But if we need to make a list, if we need to schedule ourselves, we can do that. That's using thinking. But we can still stay in our breath, in our body, in the present moment, not getting caught and pulled into some other place or time.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyra. Sylvie and Farzana?
Thank you, Kyra. Kyra, you really made us look at our country in a very different way, because right now we are going through a time when we're all negative about the country, and you have reinstalled our faith in the country. It's not that we have not recognized the country with this multicultural, multi-ethnic culture, which is actually very, very hospitable. It's very holding, it's receiving, and it has got a lot of healing quality. I think somebody came and they went from north to south and said, there's so much healing in the atmosphere, you know. So we have that benefit. But in spite of all that, what we have now is all what you know, the government, the corruption, the shortage of food, the COVID, the panic, the fear, the paranoia. It's all, riling people up. And people are all very unsettled. It is really difficult to hold people down now. They are all upset, actually rebelling. They are all confused. So in this, I think your book can be of help. But which of the aspects that you talk about, the 10 aspects, can we actually expand on to take it down to people? Because our program is now to go down and meet people face to face in the next year. So would you be able to prioritize the 10 that you have actually elaborated on, which can be more useful for us in terms of, having workshops and talking to people, and then, making them understand and being in their bodies, like you said. I mean, but they are in their bodies, but they're still thinking. They're still worrying, and they're still fearing, and they're still in a paranoia. So how do we take this forward? what are the aspects in your book that we can actually take out and take it down to the people?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Selvi, for sharing about just the level of suffering that's happening in Sri Lanka now. And my heart really breaks and goes out to everyone who's in this state of suffering. I know there's some version of it everywhere around the planet, but I think what is really important right now is to pause. You know, one of the first chapter is about coming home to ourselves. So there's a story I'll just share first that Thich Nhat Hanh, my teacher Thai, tells of the people escaping from Vietnam on boats after the war. They were overcrowded. They were filled with, you know, children, families, elderly people with all of their belongings, at risk of getting attacked by sea pirates, at risk of sinking, facing hunger, facing thirst. A lot of fear, a lot of unknown. They didn't know always where to go, to land, to find refuge. And my teacher would say, if there was just one person on the boat who could stay calm, everyone on the boat had a chance to survive. If just one person had a nervous system that was regulated, that could communicate to the other nervous systems, because that's how we are as human animals. Our nervous systems come into alignment with each other. So when there's a great deal of fear, when there's a great deal of anxiety and uncertainty, if we can, we ourselves, maintain a sense of stability, of inner groundedness, we can transmit that just by our being, before we even say anything, just by the way we walk, by the way we move, by the way we look, by the tone of our voice. It already communicates, I'm here for you. I'm holding you. My nervous system can lend you some stillness, some calm, some ability to center. Because we have amazing things available to us in our neocortex that get shut down when the amygdala, the reptilian brain, takes over. But we can communicate from one, you know, brain to another. If that reptilian brain can be soothed, all of the possible solutions and ways out that are there in our neocortex can be released and made available again. So I think really supporting people to know that they have a place inside of them always that never goes away, that they can take refuge in. They can find their way there through their breath, through their body, through, you know, if you're worrying, you're right, you are still in your body. You can bring your attention to how it feels to feel the worry in your body. That's part of coming home. Sometimes we come home and it's peaceful. Sometimes we come home and it's very, you know, erratic because we're experiencing all sorts of emotions. But when we practice to be with those emotions, we can settle them down. We can hold them. We can give them attention and kindness and friendliness. So actually, we need to feel the things that are coming up, the fear. That actually lets it move through us more quickly if we allow ourselves to feel it. But coming home, knowing that there is a place in us that is not that fear, even as we're experiencing extreme fear, is very supportive, can really help someone know, okay, this fear is here, this paranoia is here, but there is also this part of me deeper than that experience that can hold me. This is fear is impermanent. yes, there are things to be afraid of. And if I can touch this place of peace, of clarity within me, I will have a much better chance to make it through what's coming. I may be able to survive it. Whereas if I lose my sense of home, I may not survive, because I may make a wrong choice or move out of fear. And then, so I think that is really where I would emphasize that we all have this place of the capacity to come back to ourselves and care for ourselves and hold our suffering, and that no one can take that away from us. And the other thing is, it needs to be cultivated. The more we cultivate it every day through a daily discipline of some kind of returning to that place, whether it's through reading or chanting or dancing or singing or walking in a beautiful place or holding the hand of someone we love. Every time we come back to touch that, it's more available to us to hold the difficulties that arise. So we need to cultivate it, and we can trust in it.
Thank you, Kyra. Before Fuzzy speaks, where can people buy your book? I'll post it in the chat.
Yes.
On Amazon? Are you on Amazon?
It's on Amazon, and if you're in the US, it's on many independent bookstores, bookshop.org. Actually, I'll just put my website, KyraJewel.com, has many links to also international places to buy the book. So if you're in the UK or Australia or Canada, but it's on Amazon. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Fazana, please.
Wow, Kyra, I just love the last bit that you spoke about. I mean, it's so real, and it's something coming from the corporate world, which I always link to in this Wisdom Wednesdays. I always bring the corporate dimension to the group. This is a skill that is so much needed. That you have a lot of, Sri Lanka has a very high rate of non-communicable diseases, mainly caused because of stress and bad lifestyle and eating habits. And it all comes down to how they cope with issues, the pressures you come, if it's in sales, the targets or the profits and so on. So you keep going, and you just don't have that skill to deal with it and to stay calm. So you panic, and you take your whole team down with you on panic, down a dark hole, and then it's very hard to return back. Whereas one change in your mind and how you react to that situation can cause a lot more positiveness in their lives, right? About how they deal with things and their health, and how they go home. They have a bad day, they go home all grouchy, and they're a bad father, a bad husband. So this whole thing, or even as a mother, a bad mother. So this whole thing of this chain reaction can be avoided in how you respond to a situation. And I mean, that simple technique is so valuable, and it's so simple but so hard to find. I also want to give gratitude to you, Kyra. I remembered this wonderful can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
This wonderful okay, I lost my power. Maybe
there is so little time. Yes.
Can
okay.
you hear? Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. So I remember Kyra doing this wonderful session for the teenagers in Subodhi. I think, Kyra, you reached out to me saying, let's do something for young people. And I loved participating and supporting you to organize it. And despite COVID, it was around August last year, just when we opened up after COVID, we managed to have 14 teenagers. And they first came with a lot of skepticism, I think, but they left after 2 days as renewed individuals. And that was a fantastic intervention at that age. And my twins were there, and I want to give gratitude to that, because that had some deep impacts for them too. So my question that I have is, it's something that I always ask myself as well. I feel we have come to this earth not to just pass through it, but to make an impact in whoever or whatever we meet in a positive way. And the purpose and the meaning of life, I mean, is something we all look for. But how do you define your purpose? I mean, your core purpose, because some are looking for it until they die, and some find their purpose, and some don't know that they need to have a purpose. So anything you have on that, I mean, it's a difficult question, but I just want to pick your brains on that one. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for what you shared and for the question. Yeah, that teen retreat was a highlight of my 2 years in Sri Lanka. So I really am grateful for your support in making that happen. As far as our purpose, this is something really important to consider deeply. We can get focused on many things in our life, right? Like, we have to take care of the basics, and we care for our family, and we want to be successful, and but we can get caught up in many things that are not our ultimate concern, right? So there's a story, I think it's a Sufi story, that says, if you're asked by, the king to go into this other land and do one thing, but you do 1,000 other things and don't do the one thing you were asked to do, and then when you come back, your time was wasted, right? And so it's saying each of us comes here with a purpose, and even if we do so many other things, if we don't do the one thing we came here to do, we wasted our time. I mean, we can always change course, it's never too late to change course. But it's about really taking stock to look at what is our ultimate concern. What is it that we really want to say about ourselves when our life is over? What will we regret? There's some wonderful work done by people who have sat with thousands of people on their deathbed. And there's a list of like 5 things everyone shares that they regret. Not being who they were, being what other people wanted them to be. Not sharing love, which they knew they needed to share with those that they, loved, and several other things that are very common among people as their main regrets when they die. So we should learn from that. We should think about today, what is it that I can do to be the person I want to be when I die? If that means showing up for people in a certain way, if that means cultivating my own inner wisdom, right? So this ultimate concern is really what's most important. And it's not the things that our society on the whole tells us are most important. So we need to dig deeper, and all of our spiritual traditions, their purpose is to help us live in accordance with our ultimate concern, not the relative things that get most of our attention. So I think we can find our purpose by silently looking within, talking to those that we respect, thinking about our childhood. What was it that we were drawn to as a child? Sometimes we know this very clearly as a child and we forget. But it's spending time to nourish. What is it that I most want? And doing that. How can I do that? And clearing space so that the other things don't crowd out our lives, and then we don't have time for what's most important.
Beautiful. The time is of essence. But there's a question, Kyra. Riley says, happiness is supposed to be within you, but how does the environment affect us? Like when you talk about Rohingyas, that is sad. The Palestinian crisis, the Syrian. How can one circumvent that. There's so much suffering around us, and it informs and impacts us. How do we keep that separate?
So important. It's so true. We are not separate from our environment. You know, when the world around us is sick, then we also easily become sick. Not just physically, but mentally and in our hearts, in our spirit. And you know, and having said that, it's also the case that there are many examples of people who, in very difficult situations, have been able to because of their cultivation of their mind and heart, have been able to keep a clear mind and not fall into fear. And or if they fall into fear, they are able to take care of their fear. And thinking of Nelson Mandela in prison for 30 something years, and how he kept his mind and body strong and clear, and did not fall into bitterness and rage and, you know, destructive emotions. And so for me, what I take from your question is, we all need to take care of what we can take care of in our own lives. We can't have always influence in other parts of the world, but we can take care of our part of the world, our small corner. We can take care of our happiness, doing everything we can to, you know, increase our happiness, to help those near us. There are many people suffering very deeply right around us. How can we care for them? How can we bring lightness to their spirit? Sometimes compassion is a source of happiness in the face of others' suffering. If we can bring compassion, that is what keeps us sane, keeps us afloat, is this deep desire to relieve their suffering, to do something to show them that they are loved. Even if we can't change the war that's engulfing them, we can express our compassion. So, but we need to start by caring for what's right in our part of the world. And if we can do that, then we can offer the strength of our mind, of our heart, by caring for what's here in our environment. That is something that we have to offer. Because even, you know, we have this collective mind, right? We are separated in space and time according to Newtonian physics, but according to quantum physics, we're not separate at all. So if one of us in one place in the world is able to bring peace and joy to oneself, to people around us, that affects the people in the refugee camps, the Rohingya. It affects the people in Palestine. It affects the people in Syria, because we all share one universal mind. And so the healing that we can each do in our own small corner of the planet is on behalf of all.
Thank you, Kyra. Time is up, but I have one last question before we close. The ocean of tears cannot drown us if we have karuna, compassion. And that is why the Buddha's smile is possible, you write. So how can I have compassion for a neighbor who is harming me, or for the government that is not taking care of my welfare, or a friend who has betrayed me? How can I have compassion?
Thank you. Well, we can start by having compassion for ourselves and our own suffering that these very difficult situations would bring. Really turning to ourselves with love, with support, you know, listening to the sense of betrayal, the sense of not being protected, that sense of this is not fair, this is not just. We can really open to that feeling and hold it and care for it and let it be in our body, let it expand in our body. You know, if we feel it in our chest, we let it move down to our hands and let it move down through our legs, so that more parts of our body are helping to take care of that experience. And then as we open up to our own experience with compassion, what is important to see is that many beings are also suffering like we are. Maybe other people are suffering the kind of oppression or betrayal that we're suffering. We can open our hearts to have compassion for them. Even the people creating these situations of oppression, the oppressors, the persecutors, they are also somehow cut off from their own humanity if they're creating a situation of oppression. So we look with these eyes of interbeing, right? And that's how we can see even those causing suffering are suffering themselves. And it's not that in compassion, it doesn't mean that we agree with what they're doing or that we allow it to continue, but we understand deeper than what's on the surface that they are also suffering, that they also need our compassion. That's the heart of the Buddha, that sees that we each have in us, right? That capacity to see, like Jesus on the cross, forgive them for they know not what they do, right? And that's something that we can build to over time. If it doesn't feel accessible, we start with compassion to ourselves, with compassion to others that we are close to that are suffering. And over time, we may, develop the eyes that can see even the suffering of our enemy.
Any last questions, Fuzzy and Sylvie, before we close? Thank you, sir. We can't hear you, Sylvie. Unmute.
Thank you, Kyra. Thank you very much. I don't think I have any more questions. It was so wonderful to hear you today.
Thank you.
Fazana will close our show. Fazana, close for us, please, and announce our 22 that will be back in January. And thank you, everybody. Okay, Fuzzy. Okay, then we have come to the end of the show, and thank you, Kyra, and thank you to everybody. Amina, Kamini, Sylvie, Fazana, Carol, Tenzin. We have worked strongly and powerfully as a team, and we miss you. I hope you'll visit Sri Lanka again, and I just strongly urge everybody, buy this book. You can read it in a day, and it really can shift to your presence and your consciousness. And we will meet again in January of 2022, where we will also continue with this program, but we want to focus more on doing work on the ground. Thank you, everybody. Have a very fabulous New Year and a Merry Christmas to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.